So we're going to start the next presentation now, and I'm going to let Savva introduce himself and the presentation for crowdfunded cures.
Okay. Yeah, hi guys. So I'm from Crowdfunded Cures, and I'm a patent attorney and a barrister solicitor of High Court of New Zealand and lawyer in Queensland. I did my master's thesis on finding alternatives to the patent system for funding medical research. We're also partnered with VitaDAO and Molecule. So the problem we're looking at is really close to me. It's around healthcare innovation and inefficiencies, really inspired by the thesis of Dr. Scannell. Basically, US healthcare expenditure is now over 20% of GDP, and new drugs are basically costing over $1 billion per year and exponentially increasing. So generic drugs can help. So the problem is that under the current patent system, there's a patent-centric model. If you go and talk to a VC, they just want to hear, have you got a patentable molecule? Have you got a new composition of matter patent? And it doesn't matter if you've got like the cure for some disease or whatever it might be. It's just there's no way they can make money out of it unless you've got a new a patentable molecule, and as a result, safe, low-cost, and effective treatments are being ignored. So the reason for this is what happens is this thing called a patent cliff. So as drugs are newly developed, they're on patent, and they're very, very expensive, and that's what they use to get their money back. Basically, they charge a monopoly price, and then what happens is that as soon as the patent goes off, as soon as the drug goes off patent, the price of that crashes to almost sort of a nominal value, and because they make it in China and India and all these other places. That's called the patent cliff, and all the profitability goes away. And so basically, generic drugs are essentially public goods. Generic drugs are off-patent drugs. So 90% of the drugs that are prescribed in the US are off-patent. And the issue is that method of use patents, or different kinds of patents where you're looking at the treatment protocol, so you take an off-patent drug and you try and find a new use for it. You can't stop doctors basically taking an off-patent drug and using that for a new use. You can't build a business model based on suing doctors and patients. So essentially, these new uses for off-patent drugs are non-rivalrous and non-excludable public goods. And so there's this other problem, which is that doctors don't want to prescribe generic drugs off-label unless you've got large phase 3 clinical trials. And the FDA also is not going to approve your drug for the new use. So that ensures that these off-patent drugs, you might have some very small studies showing efficacy, but it's never going to be a mainstream treatment that helps millions and millions of people, because what you need is very large clinical trials, and that costs a lot of money. You're talking for generic drug repurposing. I mean, for a new drug, you're talking sort of billions and billions of dollars. For generic drug repurposing, you're actually talking sort of $10 to $30 million, just because it's a lot faster to get to phase 3. Basically, you don't have to bother about the safety of, well, the safety has already been established, so you can move straight to phase 3. And then it also, you can get to market a lot faster. So instead of waiting around 15 years for your longevity drug or your cancer drug or whatever it might be, you only have to wait 3 years. But there is this kind of market failure. There's also this massive opportunity. So, there's thousands and thousands of generic drugs. There's also thousands of nutraceuticals, things that we call supplements that people spend billions and billions of dollars on. But again, no method to enforce a monopoly price over these off-patent drugs. There's only a very tiny fraction of the drugs that are out there on the market might be patentable. So there's this huge lost opportunity and value and market opportunity. Also, as I was saying, is massive cost savings for generics. So $313 billion in 2019 in the US alone from use of generics, and $2.2 trillion over 10 years in the US. But there's no mechanism to basically capture those cost savings and drive them into the present under the patent system. So this isn't just sort of science fiction. There are a bunch of repurposing opportunities. It's not quack medicine. Naltrexone can be used to treat chronic pain. BCG vaccine has been shown that it can help stabilize blood sugar levels and type 1 diabetes. It's also been shown to boost innate immunity for respiratory illness, so it could be sort of seen as like a universal vaccine, which one of our partners, Open Source Pharma Foundation, are also looking at. There's tetrathiomolybdate, which is basically it's a copper chelation agent, and it's essentially like an industrial chemical, but it helps reduce incidence of breast cancer recurrence, but off patent. Fluvoxamine is a bit of that has been shown in a Brazilian clinical trial, 1,500 people, to reduce chance of death by 90% and reduce hospitalizations by 30%, which is on par actually with Merck's brand new patented drug called molnupiravir, which is $800 a course. A course of fluvoxamine is $10 a course. So there's this massive cost difference for off-patent drugs versus patented drugs. Molnupiravir is expected to cost around $12 billion by 2025. So all these sales, all this money being spent on patented drugs and basically just not even a tiny fraction being spent on repurposing drugs. So there's this massive missed opportunity because of this sole reliance on the patent system in order to make ROI. So also the elephant in the room is around repurposing psychedelics, cannabis, and plant-based medicine. A lot of these are off-patent. So something like cannabis, we've had the opiate crisis. It's killed millions and millions of people. It's caused approximately $1 trillion apparently in the US and Canada over and every year. You can't OD on cannabis, and research shows that you can actually reduce reliance on opiate use by managing chronic pain with cannabis. However, despite off-label use of cannabis, you can go to an off-label sort of a kooky kind of doctor and get prescribed cannabis off-label. There's no FDA-approved cannabis product or cannabis flower. There's one called Marinol, I believe, which is used to treat cancer pain. It's a very narrow indication, also to treat improve your basically munchies. You can eat a lot more when you're sick. And also CBD was the big one for childhood epilepsy, but no mainstream use of cannabis to treat chronic pain, even though it's basically used like that off-label. Same with psilocybin. Research has shown that it has very large, rapid, sustainable antidepressant effects. I'm a very pro, and it seems to, that's the other issue. Is it's an off-patent drug. It's available off-patent. There are attempts to basically tweak the molecule. However, this off-patent molecule is the one that we might have co-evolved with and might have actually helped guide our evolution, human evolution and things like that. So there are reasons why we should want to promote the development of off-patent, safe and effective molecules. So the solution is basically it's called a pay-for-success contract, or you could think of it like a retroactive public goods funding, which Vitalik Buterin had been talking about as a way to fund public good medicines. So the idea is that basically the tricky part is finding somebody that's willing to pay for repurposed generic drugs and essentially paying for the data that's encrypted in, say, an IP-NFT or clinical trial data. If you successfully repurpose the drug, then you will get a premium or you'll get a prize, say $10 million, $20 million. There will be people out there that want to treat illness, that it's worth 20 million pounds or dollars or 50 million pounds for them to find a cheap off-patent treatment for their particular disease. But that is the tricky part, and that's what we're focused on. That's kind of our difficulty. But once you've got the success payer, you can get then an impact investor that goes and basically acts like a VC, goes and finds the right generic drugs, funds the generic drug repurposing protocol. So the question is, why is this different from traditional sort of public funding? Don't we fund clinical trials for repurposing generic drugs? There's a lot of advantages to using this particular model. First, it's decentralized. It's meritocratic. You don't have to know the funding agencies. You don't have to, as Lawrence was talking about, spend hundreds of hours going through these grant funding applications. You can't really be a maverick, think outside the box, and things like that. It's not meritocratic. This is a purely decentralized way of doing science. You've got a prize, you've got an outcome. If you take it to market and if you succeed, it doesn't matter who you are. If you get the outcome, you'll get the funding. But essentially, there are other advantages. So risk is transferred from like government and from philanthropy and from the high net worth individuals onto the markets. People are willing to take risks. That's what the markets do. It's like, oil barons and things like that, and people that do very high risk research, and VCs, they take a lot of punts, they take a lot of shots at goal. So they're okay with taking it on risk as long as the upside is there. And they can price it in. So if your prize is like $1 million, then they might only want to lend you $200,000 or $500,000, depending on what they think the chances are of success. So it's basically there's a market model to factor in the risk. Also, pharma industry, they're a lot more well equipped. They're better paid than than the public sector. The free market is very good at allocating resources. As long as you can make 10% per annum, which isn't a lot of money, you've got $30 trillion available to invest in your particular product. Also, there's this arbitrage opportunity. These are drugs that have never been looked at before by private industry. I mean, they can do reformulations, and we'll talk about doing reformulations later on, but definitely you're not going to go to a VC and say, hey, I've got a repurposed generic drug, give me some money. They'll laugh you out the door, and I've got a method of use patent or something like that, unless there's some way they can enforce a monopoly price and stop other people, or have this pay for success mechanism. So, I mean, we're interested in this. We think this is the future of NFTs, basically. So, at one stage you've got like Bored Ape Yacht Club, sort of primary use is visual display. On the other side, we've got an NFT representing a safe and effective off-patent treatment for your disease. How much would that NFT be worth to you? And it should be worth more than a picture of, of apes. So, and then why DAOs, basically? So there is a reason why there's not just a trivial use case for DAOs. With open source pharma IP-NFTs, you can allow fractionalized ownership. We've been talking about that earlier on the day. There's some very interesting things you can do around fractionalization, around allowing liquidity with the markets and people to basically go and fund these sorts of things. Open source pharma NFTs create a market now for public good medicine. So that's on the other side. They're basically like a prize for incentivizing people to invest in these IP NFTs. And what it would allow is someone like VitaDAO to invest in an open source medicine. So it would allow the community, researchers, to come to VitaDAO and say, hey, I can repurpose metformin, I can repurpose rapamycin, I can repurpose NMN, I can repurpose any other of these off-patent drugs, resveratrol, and I can get funding for that through VitaDAO. And it doesn't matter that it's off-patent, it just matters whether my drug will work, and that's what we all should care about. And there's also like other advantages. Very secure. Web3 is fast, transparent, secure. You can raise hundreds of millions of dollars in seconds. It's also online and transparent. More importantly, it can't be shut down. It's a protocol. So if you're creating like a disruptive mechanism that perhaps incubants might want to not be happy with a DAO, you can be sure that perhaps you're a lot more difficult and a bit more of a moving target. So as we were saying before, it's like the DAO funding model. On one side of the pay for success contract, you've got payers. They're the important ones. They're basically the ones that decide to pay for the outcomes. And then the DAO then goes and finds the research, uses like the super intelligence of capitalism, basically, to crowdsource the answer and then fund the right research using these open source pharma IP-NFTs. So we're doing a pilot at the moment. We're interested in longevity. We've partnered with VitaDAO and the Longevity Prize, who are willing to put some money towards this particular pilot. And our target is to do an open source pharma longevity prize NFT drop via our website. The idea is to fund the phase 2A RCT by Dr. Brad Stanfield, who's quite a popular YouTuber, also another New Zealander. And to look at rapamycin plus exercise in the elderly. Success criteria will be that this is a safe treatment and that it improves, there's a trend towards improvement in the primary clinical outcome, which is the 30-second chair stand test. So this is a state diagram of the model, basically. So you have VitaDAO, you have the payer fund. Say we raise $1 million, and then in return, VitaDAO will fund put 400K, and then towards a researcher. They'll be issued with an IP-NFT. If the research outcome is not met, there's no outcome payment to VitaDAO. If it is met, there's an outcome payment. So that closes the loop, creates a scalable business model for open source medicine. So this is kind of our dream, I guess, the go-to-market plan. We want to launch as a non-profit impact DAO using a SAFT, and that creates this prize model, this bounty model, to basically de-risk finding new uses for generic drugs, plant medicines, and other unmonopolizable therapies. Even things like, like lifestyle interventions, meditation, diets, things like that. However, there's not a lot of profit to be made in this kind of Kickstarter model. The for-profit element and the big opportunity is around a public good pharma company. We leverage IP-NFTs, patents, where we can look at reformulation. We can look at leveraging data exclusivity like orphan drug exclusivity. And more importantly, we can look at engaging with payers to agree to pay these pay-for-success contracts and agree to pay us for our branded version of the repurposed generic drug. So yeah, if you've got any questions, you can see us on our website, and yeah, that's some social media and stuff. And if I've got any time, I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, yeah.
Thank you, Savva. So Savva will be hanging out here for a bit. If you want to speak to him, you can still be in touch.